I have a baptism with which to be baptized, and what stress I am under until it's completed. Do you think that I come to bring peace to the earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. From now on, 5 in one household will be divided, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. They will be divided, father against son, son against father, mother against daughter, and daughter against mother, mother-in-law against daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. He also said to the crowds, when you see a cloud rising in the west, you immediately say it's going to rain. And so it happens. When you see the south wind blowing, you say there'll be scorching heat, and it happens. You hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of earth and sky. But why do you not know how to interpret the present time? The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Please be seated. Darlene, Sienna, and I went to Redview Garden Friday for a special event that included lawn games, crafts, a live band, and then was ending in the amphitheater with a showing of a movie. And the movie is one of those movies that I tend to avoid like the plague. It's the movies that are based on Dr. Seuss's short children's books. Because what works really well in the short children's books, when it is expanded to feature-length film, you have to add a lot of stuff. And usually that stuff isn't good, to be quite honest. So I was not completely pleased that we were going to see the Lorax. But I have to tell you that I was pleasantly surprised. The main antagonist of the story reaches a beautiful area which has these trees that are found everywhere. And he decides that he has been looking for those trees all of his life. Because by cutting it down, he can create his dream. But when he cuts the first tree down, something magical happens. The Lorax appears. But the funny thing about the Lorax is that this self-proclaimed speaker for trees, protector of the forest, does nothing else magical in his interactions with the antagonist. He tries to get them to respect nature. He tries to get them to care for the forest and the habits there. But when the antagonist says to him, show me your power, show me your magic, he always replies, it doesn't work that way. Time goes on, and eventually he sets into profiting. And finally, the last tree is felled. And it's then and only then that a magical moment happens. The Lorax is lifted up, vanishes into the sky, leaving behind only a small pile of rocks with the word "unless" written on it. This morning's gospel focuses the debate about Jesus and peace. It is rather unsettling to hear Jesus reject the idea that he's bringing peace. But you have to understand that peace is a complicated, complex, and refers to different things back in the first century. The most dominating vision of peace was the Pax Romanus that was put forth by the Romans. We have provided the world peace by our conquest and dominance. By the sword, we have created peace for all, so long as we continue to follow our rules and respect our military might. Now, of course, we reject that type of forced peace. We expect that concerning Jesus. And Jesus does seem, in the midst of his life, to offer and lift up peace. Bishop Frank Lowe writes, the word for peace in Hebrew is shalom, not just the absence of war. Shalom means wholeness, well-being, and health, as well as what we think of as peace. All of those meanings are present in shalom. This is God's peace which passes our understanding. Shalom is a truer, deeper peace. That promise of God's peace was part of Jesus' life and message all along. Jesus often sent those he healed on the way by saying, go in peace. Jesus makes them whole, healthy, peaceful, gives them well-being, and then sends them away in that deeper peace called shalom. In his final word of peace in Luke's Gospel, Jesus appears to his disciples after the crucifixion. It was the first time they saw Jesus after they had betrayed him and run in fear to avoid arrest. Jesus does not talk about what happened to them. Instead says, peace be with you. Jesus, God's own Son, was a man of peace who brought shalom, God's peace to broken hearts and lives. So what's going on with this passage in Luke? In the middle of his gospel, Jesus warns he's brought peace. Not peace, but conflict. And that refers to a third type of peace, the absence of conflict. And honestly, this peace is far less than the shalom hoped for. Jesus puts this in terms of family. And it's hard for us sometimes to get this full understanding because I guarantee all of our families are complicated. And so we're used to family dynamics being challenging. But in the first century context, family was the one support that one had. That blood relationship that was supposed to care for one another. But Jesus points to something in the reality of families that remains true today. Sometimes we see problems in the midst of the family, and we avoid addressing them. Why? In the name of keeping the peace. And sometimes this can be pretty devastating stuff. Problems of injustice, actions that hurt self or others. We say nothing to keep the peace. Bishop Rowe writes, the desire to avoid conflict attempts to preserve a lesser peace. The cost of accepting these accommodations and compromises is that this prevents our breaking through to the deeper peace awaiting us. Shalom, God's true and lasting peace, calls us to stand against injustice. And any time we preserve the peace at someone or some group's expense, we trade God's shalom for a poor imitation. David Lowe sees this as the real imitation of faith, not guaranteeing future heavenly bliss, but rather an invitation to live differently now, to see those around us neither as souls to be saved or threats to be deterred, but rather to see everyone, God's children, to be loved, honored, and cared for. The pursuit of such a peace brings conflict. But if done with kindness and relationship, in the midst of conflict, there is also the promise of hope. And that's what the letter of Paul to the Hebrews is trying to get at. Using the metaphor of a race, suggesting that our life journey is one that will be filled with hardship and problems, and perhaps some reason to give up. But the hope that Paul has is a completion of the life journey in a faithful way. And in it, he provides a roadmap. Now, if Paul was alive today, I have to believe that he would alter the story just a bit. It'd still be a race, but it would be a very specific type of race. It would be a marathon. And marathon works on numerous aspects. One is because it's so freaking long. Just look at COVID. That's a long marathon, right? When we're still running. But there's something about the event that is a marathon that I want to draw your attention to. Now, I've run 2 marathons in my life. One felt wonderful, the first one. I trained for it, I worked hard for it, I got to the day, it was a beautiful day. The other one, I didn't train for it at all. Oh my gosh, it was miserable. I was miserable in it. But in both cases, the most important part of it all was the gathered event in and of itself. You see, the elite runners finished while I was only about halfway on the course. I wasn't competing against them. In fact, I wasn't even competing against the person who was running next to me, or passes me up, or that I passed by. Because marathons are always about the journey through and reaching the completion. They are a test of stamina and of something that isn't usual. You see, even someone who trains for a marathon doesn't run a marathon on a regular basis. Because honestly, weird things happen to the human body when you hit about 20 miles. You usually train only to about that 20-mile point, because once you go past that, I feel like your body starts to break down a bit, and so does your mind does as well too. And the only way to get through that is the help of others. The people who have gathered for the marathon itself. And note that Paul doesn't call them spectators, but a cloud of witnesses. A.B. Richter writes, these are witnesses, not just spectators. There's a huge difference. A spectator watches you go through something. A witness is someone who has gone through something herself. And the root meaning of the word witness, from which we get the word martyr, is someone who may have given his life going through it. We have witnesses cheering us on, not just spectators, people who have gone through what we struggle with, people whose testimonies of the strength of God, the strength God gave them, can in turn give us strength and courage. Paul's telling us that we have witnesses rooting for us, weeping with us when we stumble, calling us when we wander, urging us to finish the race. The race of our lifetime. And to take notice that the lives others are journeying on as well. The Lord's book ends with an understanding about what the West was calling for, what was the potential for hope, but it leaves the results in uncertainty. The movie goes farther down the road of hope. And normally you should worry about spoiling a movie from 10 years ago, but in this case, I'm not going to spoil it other than give you the Seuss quote that ends it. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. The midst of all of our lives, the hope for a peace that God yearns for depends on you, and never solely on you. Your authentic life to be lived is yours and yours alone. And God accompanies you on it, as does the great crowd of witnesses. But the overarching promise of God is the story does not end until the world is at peace with justice. And that framework, that vision, is the hope that is to spur us forward. Thanks be to God.
Amen.
Please stand as you are able and let us together sing the Nicene Creed. We believe in one God, the Father, the Almighty,